So we have here our database table for products containing product name, quantity, price, mail order, etc. And I want to build an application that does the whole set of operations, adding elements to the table, displaying the whole content of the table, enabling us to edit any individual product, and also deleting them. So the first thing I'm gonna do is that in the index controller, I want to put a button that sends me to the add controller where the add will take place. So I just put here a placeholder. So let's go to index. I just want to add a button. So if I look at the Bulma styling information, okay, here in the Bulma styling, you can look at what to do for buttons with icons. Okay, that's what I want to do. And so we can have a button, actually an anchor of class button, okay, and inside the anchor I want to have a span of class icon, okay, that contains the actual icon. E class is equal to fa plus. So this will give me a plus icon in Font Awesome 4.7. And the other span I want is simply the text span add. Okay, so this should work. I haven't put any href to this anchor. Okay, I can do that next, but first let me look at how this looks like. So if I go here, I reload. Yes. Maybe I want this in a different color, and so I can say, for example, A class's button is success. This will make it a little bit prettier in green. Okay, very nice. Now I want the href of this A link. This is a link, so if you click you go someplace, and I want href to be a URL that is the URL of my add method. So here I say add. Okay, so if I do this, if I reload, this should take me to add. Yes, I can see it also below. And the add URL will not do anything, right? It will show me a blank page because I didn't put any code in there. So now comes the interesting part. So this action add here, I want this to be able to when I do a get on it, I want to get an empty form, and then when I post the form back to the same endpoint, I want to be able to insert the product. And I don't want to create the form by hand. I want to actually ask Py4Web's help in creating the form for me. Okay, so let me try to write some code here. So the first thing is that I want to say is that this is method is equal to get and also post. So I want to be able to serve both get and post requests. Remember, the default is only get requests. Okay, and so I can write the following code. Actually, I can create a form. Sorry, lowercase. So this form I have to import it from Py4Web. Py4Web has a form helper. Sorry, it's here that I have to put the import. So I write from py4web.utils.form import form, and I also want to import this form style Bulma that will be necessary to format the form in a nice way. Okay, so coming back here, now the form exists. Okay, and I want to say that the form is generated automatically from a DB table. The DB table was called product, so I say db.product here. Then I say CSRF session is equal to session. Okay, this causes the form to be protected, and the form style is equal to form style Bulma. So the protection of the form is the inclusion of that secret that I was mentioning in the last lecture against forms being submitted from other sites to it. Okay, so this creates a form. Then there is this incredibly powerful instruction that says if form.accepted. This is an incredible shorthand and essentially does the following. If it's a GET request, well, it doesn't do anything because GET forms are not accepted. GET forms are generated. So this only is active for POST requests. But if the request is a POST, so if we are receiving a POST, this means that we received a POST and all the fields are okay. For example, all the fields, satisfy these requirements. Range requirements, not empty requirement, all these required fields are validated. So if that's the case, then the post is the data is actually already inserted in the database, and so we simply redirect the insertion already happened. Okay, if you don't want the insertion to happen automatically, forms have dbio is equal to false that you can use in order to say, accept the form but don't modify the database, please. But if you don't say anything, that's automatic. Okay, so I can say here simply redirect URL of index. So you do one insertion at a time. Maybe I should have done it so that you can do multiple at a time, but my idea was to do one at a time. After you do an insertion, you go back to index, okay? And in any case, or especially, so there are two cases in which you reach this line. So either this is a GET form, a GET request, or this is a POST but not accepted. So with errors. Okay, so in either case, you need to return a form. It's gonna be either blank or it contains some error indication. And so you say at this point, return dictionary of form is equal to form. This is just a single dictionary that contains a form. Okay, great. Now I need to add here add.html, right? The page template. So let me, for laziness, just duplicate index, add, okay, now I have it, add it to Git. Okay, this I don't need, and I think, we may want to put just for beauty an h1 class is equal to title, that says something like insert a product, okay, and after this, we can just put the form. Okay, so look, the form here is a component of the dictionary, right? And so I can put it on the page by just doing this. So let's see how this works actually. So let me restart for web. Always keep an eye on errors. It's always possible to make them. So if I now go here, magically I get a form. Except that this created by and creation date are displayed, which I do not quite want. Okay. Let me go again in the definition of the form here. Okay. And I wanted this product created by readable. Maybe I should also put writable to be equal to false, is equal to db product created by writable is equal to false. And likewise, this one, I also wanted to prevent okay, so let's see whether this manages to actually remove that from the form. Yes, so this is a better looking form, okay? And now, to show that I'm not cheating, let's go to the database. I can select the lecture Then I can go, I don't want neither these nor these, I just want the database. So there is this product database, which is empty. And now if I insert a product, for example, I can have apples. I might have, I don't know, 10 of them, and they cost whatever, $4.99. Okay, you can mail order apples. I click on submit. Okay, and I'm back to the index. So nothing special happened. No error here is displayed, so I'm still okay, magically. And if I go to the dashboard, well, if I go to the database and I refresh it, these are my apples. Apples 10 for 99, mail order, created by lucadelfaro.com. You see, this is a default field being active. And this is the time in UTC at which they were added. So actually this works. Once this works, I can add one more product just to put a couple of them at least. So these are bananas. The quantity is 20. The price is, I don't know, 3.98. Can't be mail ordered, and I submit. And so now I have a couple of products in my database just to make it more interesting. And what I want to do now is in this index method that is now empty here, I want to put code that will display the set of products that I have. Okay, so I have two tasks here. First is to read all the products from the database, and the second task is then to display them. So let's do them. I can say, so the documentation is in the database abstraction layer, but I can say rows is equal to db. db is my database handler, and I can say db, how did I call it? Often I have to refer, right? Created by db created by db product created by is equal to get user email, right? I don't want everybody's products. I just want the ones I created. Okay, so this will get them to me, and then I do select. Okay, this does the query and returns an iterator over the rows. Okay, and I think that this is good enough, and I can send the list of rows to the view. And so I say rows is equal to rows. And now I have to edit index.html so that it displays a table of rows. So here we are in index.html, and here I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna cut and paste to be slightly faster the code that is necessary. It's going to be this one. So I added, below our button, a container that contains a table. The table contains the following, okay? There is an ID, which I may or may not want to display. In this case, I'm displaying it. Normally, perhaps you would avoid it. But there is an ID, product name, product quantity, product cost, mail order. So this is a header of the table, the one thing that will generate the column headings. And below that, I loop over the rows. Okay, the rows are passed to me here, right? These are the rows. So I loop over the rows and I output a TD tag, which is for table data. For each one of the rows, I output the ID, the product name, the product quantity, etc., etc. Okay, so exactly the values. And I do another thing that is I add an edit. Let me just call it edit. I add an edit button to each row. Okay. We will see later how this behaves. For the moment, let me just save this code. And this should actually work to give us a display of the information we have in the database. So let's look at it. I need to restart. Okay, watch for errors always. Okay, no errors. So if I go here, I should now see that I have an error. So where is my error? I go here, and it's in the template. So there is an attribute that I do not have. This is one of these slightly annoying errors, and so what I have to compare is essentially these attributes with what I'm actually given. Okay. And so it's always a bit painstaking. You need to compare these attributes with a declaration of what is in the model. And the problem is that the product price is defined, but here I use product cost. So that was not very smart. Product price I need to write here. Okay, so I try again and I succeed. Okay, so this is my table. And I have an edit button. The edit button doesn't work yet. I haven't talked about it yet. Okay, but I can display the content of my table. You may complain that this is misaligned, etc. You can certainly align it better, but I just want to get done with the basic logic in this moment. Okay. So in order to do the next step, we need to make this edit button functional. Now the edit button is very interesting because, of course, here in the controllers, I will need an edit method, right? So I can start writing, in fact, already. I can start writing action edit method is equal to, again, get and post, because it's again something that we perform with a form, right? So I will need a form, and then I can say action.uses. I need the database, I need the session, the user has to be logged in, and I can put it at edit.html, okay? And I can say def edit, okay? But the problem is, so this is sort of, it's called boilerplate. It means a code that doesn't change very often. But now the problem is, how do I communicate which of the various products do I want to edit? You see, if there are multiple rows. How do I say whether I'm actually clicking on this button or on this button, okay? So what I want to do is I want to create an edit, a URL. If you see it at the bottom, but perhaps it's too small. This URL will be edit/1 because the ID is 1, and this URL will be edit/2 because the ID is 2 for bananas, right? So if I write here to take notes, I can say this endpoint will be used for URLs of the form. So there is the application name, of course, right? But aside from these, there will be edit/k, where k is the product ID. Okay, so how do I say that? You know that the URL is not simply edit, but it contains something more. I do it in this way. Here, the endpoint, I don't define it to be simply edit, but I say it's edit/ a product ID, which is, by the way, of an integer. Okay, that's the way I say that there is a product ID. And I want to receive it here, product ID, none. I mean, I don't expect this to be none, right? But that's the way I have to define it, sorry, not with a colon, with an equal. Okay. So I can in fact say here, if I like, assert product ID is not none, because I really don't want to edit a no product. I want to be able to read it, so I want to read it from the database. We read the product being edited from the DB. Okay, so I say P is equal to DB product. I could write a query, right? I could write this actually. DB product ID is equal to product ID, and I could say select, and I would say just give me the first one. I could say something like this if I wanted, but I don't want to say something like that. I want to use a shorthand which is really convenient, which is P is equal to DB product product ID. So this is perhaps you can think it's too crazy a shortcut, but it's super convenient, and why not using it? So you can say then if P is none, this means that you haven't found the product to be edited in the database. You may wonder, hey, how can it be? We built the link on purpose. How can it be that the product is not in the database? Well, people could have forged the link. You can never trust the information that comes from the browser. So if P is none, nothing found to be edited, you can write. And you do redirect or to the URL that is the index, for example, right? If you don't find anything to edit, you want to boot people away, send them to the classical homepage and be done with it. You don't really need to be very smart in what you do, because this is sort of an error condition and you don't assume that this is going to happen in practice. But otherwise, we need to build a form similarly to what we did there. So let me copy the line so that I save a bit of typing. But with a difference, okay? So the difference is that I say the record is equal to P. So this form didn't specify any record to be edited, and so this was an insert form. Maybe I should add it. Insert form. No record in it. Okay? And instead this one is an edit form. It has record is equal to something. I also don't want, normally Py4Web is even too helpful for my taste. It adds a delete checkbox. I want to take care of deletions in my own way later, right? So here I just want to say deletable is equal to false, so that behavior is not triggered. The rest is fine. And again, just as before, semi-magically I can say if a form is accepted, okay, the update already happened. And so I can simply do redirect to the URL of index. Okay? And otherwise I return a dictionary with the form. So that's all it takes. But I have yet to do two things. I have to show you how I produce this URL, and then of course I have to produce the edit.html page. So let's do the two in order. In the index here, actually this part was already there, right? I was putting one button for every row. Okay. This button is styled slightly less well. Maybe I want to style it better. Span class is equal to icon. Sorry, it's just aesthetically, and then I do another span here around the edit. Okay, so this is slightly better, but the point is, how do I produce the URL? I produce it in this way. So the URL helper, let me write above just a scratch, but if I say URL of edit, and here I say like Luca, and here I say XYZ, and XYZ have values 1, 2, 3. This produces the URL edit, actually app name, so the application, then edit, then there will be Luca, then there will be 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so the various components of the URL helper are concatenated with slashes. Okay, so let me remove that explanation text. So here in this button the URL will be contain edit and then the row ID. The row ID is this number here, right? So I'm gonna generate exactly the URLs of the form I need, because it's gonna be edit/id, which is what my controller expects here. Okay, so I can now check whether everything works. Well, it doesn't work, right? Because I need to do the second thing. I need to have the edit.html defined. So let me copy add.html. Okay, and actually I think it well, edit a product, that's the only difference. So let me see whether it all works. I always want to keep an eye for errors. Okay, this seems to not generate any. I reload this just for out of safety. Let me edit the bananas. Yeah, I can edit them. And so look at what happens if I put an illegal price here, right? I can put it, but when I do submit, notice, before I do the submit, notice that here in the definition, I say that the price is a float that has range from 0 to 1 million. So this will not be a legal value. So if I submit, I get an error message. It's a bit small, maybe I could style it better with CSS. But it tells me to enter a number between 0 and 1 million. Okay? And so if I now edit this to be 798, okay? And I click on, I declick mail order and I click on submit. Okay? Now the bananas have 798. The mail order field is always true, and this is a mistake. So this all works, aside from the Boolean field, that we will get to that later. This all works, but I want to show you essentially the security element. So I described it, and but I haven't showed you where it is. So why are these forms secure, unlike the ones of the previous class, previous lecture? Well, if we look at the form, okay, we can look at it in detail. It's a form, it has a div for many fields, and then in some place, okay, there is an input hidden of type form key that has a long random value. This is the security element. This form key, which is a hidden field, is generated on the basis of the user session, of my session on this site. And when I submit the form, it will be checked whether the form has a correct key. And if the correct key is not found, the form will be rejected, okay? So if you try to attack, if you try to generate a similar form from another website, you will essentially not know how to generate a valid form key, okay? I can demonstrate it very easily by editing this form key, and I can modify the value. For example, I can delete a piece of it, okay? This should be enough to make it invalid. So I have now modified my form key, and I try to add a product, which is, I don't know, melons, and I want 5 melons, and 5 melons are, I don't know how they are, but $6.99, okay? And I click on submit, and this does nothing. Okay, the form is being rejected. Okay? Perhaps you say that the rejection should generate a bigger blow-up, and one could indeed modify Py4Web, but remember, we're defending ourselves with respect to an attack. So what is going on, we may not want to particularly say match, but we certainly don't want to add any melons to the database. So the last thing I would like to do is to add here a button to delete a row. So let me do that. I go into the code again. So here is where I generate the table, and I want one more column for my delete button. And I want to generate a button that is very similar to this one. So let me cut and paste it. Okay. Wait, I misplaced it this way. Okay, so I want the button to say delete, to specify which row to delete, and then I want fat trash as the icon, which is a trash can. Okay, and I don't need to say edit, in fact, or delete. It will be obvious. Okay, so I want to do something like this. Let me see whether it works. If I go here now, I can... Yeah, okay, that's okay. Now there is a problem, however. This URL per se is a generic URL, and anybody can click it, both from this site, but I could also go on and make an attacker site and put there the same URL, and when people click it, they would delete their products. So that's not okay, right? I have to make sure that people cannot forge these URLs to delete. I have to put some protection attached to these URLs. So it is done by signing them. Again, they are signed according to a secret that is in the user session, so that attackers cannot guess what is the right signature of one such button. Okay, so you sign that by simply saying delete row ID, and you say signer is equal to URL signer. Okay, so what is this URL signer? This URL signer, we created it actually for you here. Okay, and is based on the session. So the session will contain a secret that is used to sign the URL, so that attackers who have no access to the session will not be able to sign the URL properly. Okay, now the only problem is that I have to pass here in the index not only the rows, but also the URL signer. Okay, let me see whether this works first. Well, I have to reload. Okay, so if I reload this page, yes, it works. And now this URL is simple, because this URL just takes me to a form. I need to protect the form, but not the URL per se. But because this URL has an immediate effect, I need to essentially make sure that it's protected. So in fact, if you look below, you see it's written small, but you see that the URL has the form delete to __ signature is equal to, and then there is a big random string. Okay, that's as a signature of the URL. Now let me write the endpoint that corresponds to that URL. Okay, so I go here at the bottom, I say action delete, and again there is a product ID, which is an integer. Okay, the method is only a get method, so I don't need to say anything else. There is action.uses, and here I put db session auth.user, and here I put I don't need any UI, because I simply want to delete the product and then send you back to the list of products, but I need to put URL signer.verify. This is what causes you the verification of the signature. Okay, so this is what will reject any attempt to click the button from places that cannot sign the URL properly. So here you can say def delete, for instance, or product ID is equal to none again, and here I can say assert product ID is not none. Okay, now there is a philosophical question, do I want to check that you are the owner of the product you are deleting? In truth, there is no need for it, because if you have displayed the product, this URL is signed, so you cannot invent, even on your own, a URL for deleting a product that is not displayed to you. So there is no need for further checks, and I can just go ahead and actually delete the product from the database. I can say db.product.id is equal to product ID, delete. And once the product is deleted, I can just redirect you to this list of all the products. Redirect to URL of index. Let me see whether this works. And so I can click here. Pof. Pof. It works. So now I can add, I don't know, grapes. The quantity is 20. The price is $30, kind of expensive. Now I have grapes again. No more grapes. So this shows you how to build a simple application in which you can display all the products via this index endpoint, add them, edit them, and delete them. Okay, and the security is ensured for add and edit via the form key that is included in each form, and it is ensured for delete by the signature that is present in every URL.